We begin in Ukraine this hour as fighting continues around the city of Kharkiv after Russia made its biggest territorial gains in 18 months. In the past few hours, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said Russia has no current plans to capture the city of Kharkiv in the northeast of the country. But in the region itself, police are going door to door in the town of Vovchansk to evacuate the remaining residents as Russian shelling intensifies. These images are from Vovchansk. Russia launched a surprise offensive there last week, with one analysis suggesting Russian forces have advanced by about 10 kilometers, creating a new front in the war on Ukraine. A 16-and-a-half-hour air raid alert has now been lifted in Kharkiv itself. Let's speak to our Ukraine correspondent, James Waterhouse, who's in the capital, Kyiv. James, hello to you. So there seems to be a little bit of a difference, isn't there, between what President Putin is saying, that there are no plans to capture Kharkiv, and what we're actually seeing happening on the ground there?
Absolutely, and you can see in those pictures how this war has now firmly moved from trench warfare in this northeastern part of the front line. Now, I don't think the words of Vladimir Putin, where he said at a press conference in China that there were no plans for now to try and capture the city of Kharkiv, I don't think that will bring a collective sigh of relief for the thousands of people still living in the city. I think there are two things at play. Firstly, I don't think this collection of Russian forces, these sort of between 5,000 to 10,000 estimated troops that have made this incursion across the border, it's not yet thought they are capable of surrounding the city, especially when you consider that around 80,000 Russian troops were involved in capturing a town called Avdiivka further south, which is a fraction of the size of Kharkiv. But secondly, I don't think anyone believes what Vladimir Putin when he talks about his plans for this continued invasion, because once upon a time in 2022, he said he had no plans to invade Ukraine. So I think that has shaped the common Ukrainian view since then. He also talked about, I think, he almost reflected his lack of willingness to compromise. He talked about Ukraine's conditions for peace, which include restoring its original borders. So that would include Crimea, which has been occupied since 2014, and for Russian forces to withdraw completely. He described those conditions as being based on wishes and not the realities of the battlefield. And I think that is the rub at this moment in time, and that is why we can expect fierce fighting to certainly continue.
Amid that fierce fighting, what sort of assessments are you hearing from the Ukrainian side about their capability to hold the line as they wait for resupply of munitions from America and elsewhere?
Yeah, I think you just need to look at what President Zelensky's saying. You know, he has cancelled international travel. He's visited the city of Kharkiv, and he described the situation as being very difficult but under control. And the authorities have said this before, when Ukraine has ultimately lost more territory. He is claiming that the Russians have, their advance has gone around 10 kilometers at its deepest. And he blames the lack of air defenses, which he's still pushing the West for them being able to push in this far in terms of the heavy bombardments that they've been able to launch, these Russian forces. So he is blaming that, but it is clear his troops are struggling. They are moving reserve forces away from towns like Chasiv Yar, which is coming under heavy attacks still and has done for months. They're moving personnel from Zaporizhia even further south. And so what that means is while Ukraine tries to plug this gap and tries to slow this Russian advance in the northeast, it thins the front line elsewhere. It is a front line that is creaking, and crucially for Ukraine, it's growing too.
James, thank you very much. James Waterhouse in Kyiv. And earlier I spoke to reporter for the Kyiv Independent, Francis Farrell, who's in Kharkiv, and I asked him whether he agreed with President Zelensky's assessment that the situation in Kharkiv had stabilized for the moment.
Well, it is too early to say, to be perfectly honest with you, about whether Russian territorial gains will continue in the Kharkiv region to move forward or not. They have slowed down, and we know most certainly that they don't plan to try and surround or assault this huge city in the short term. Even Putin said today himself that that wasn't the plan. But as for the stabilization, it still remains too early to say, because they certainly want to get within artillery range of Kharkiv, and overall they just want to pressure the Ukrainian military as much as possible on as many fronts as possible before mobilization starts to kick in a bit more and more of the Western aid starts to arrive.
Yeah, and reports from the chief of Ukraine's army saying that Ukrainian troops are preparing to defend the Sumy area as well. Just explain for our viewers geographically where that is in relation to Kharkiv, and have you heard those reports also, Francis?
Yes, so we've heard about that, and that's definitely something that the whole country is potentially waiting for, another similar cross-border operation to find weak points in the contact lines. Sumy Oblast is just northwest of Kharkiv, and it's a huge, long, winding border, several hundred kilometers long. And so if Ukraine can't basically protect that whole area with enough reserves, then Russia could find a weak point and could look to carry out another similarly opportunistic offensive to just stretch the Ukrainian forces even further.
And let's talk now to our Ukrainian reporter Olga Malchevska on what's known about what's happening in the town of Vovchansk. Olga.
This is not a new territory for the Russian forces. They had been here before. The town of Vovchansk, as you can see, in the east of Ukraine, had been occupied before by the Russian troops in the very beginning of their open-scale invasion in the beginning of 2022. And we can see here that it is not close to the city of Kharkiv, so it is roughly over 10 kilometers away from the city of Kharkiv. Now we can see that the town of Vovchansk is very close to the Russian border, and Ukrainian authorities claim that they still control it, although there are street fights. Now, we managed to obtain a footage from the Ukrainian border service which shows the heavy fighting in the town of Vovchansk. Here we can see the footage which we managed to get from the border service, and we can see how Ukrainian troops are trying to target Russian troops. And here, exactly on that particular bit, we can see the street fighting in the town. So Ukrainian authorities claim that Russians still don't control the town of Vovchansk, although they also admit that the situation there is very heavy and that there are street fightings at the north of the town. Now, I managed to reach some locals who are trying to carry on evacuation of people from that region, and what they told me is that it is not possible to penetrate to the town before because of the heavy fighting. Although they also told me that they managed to evacuate around 6,000 people from the town of Vovchansk and the towns around of it, and the situation remains really heavy. Anita.
Olga, thank you very much.